And welcome back. This is American Bulldog and Company. I am your host, Justin McKee. And today, we've somehow lucked out and got Gesa Waldhecker on board to come online. Um, Gesa's program is Chestnut's Little Indians. And before we get too far into this thing, I've just got to know, where did we come up with this kennel name?
That is a long story of me being very interested in the culture of the Native Americans. Reading lots of books as a teenager, and then when it was time to name my kennel, this is actually, I wanted something that's different because everyone in Germany seemed to have a white, it was a white bulls, it was a white whatever. So I wanted something different, and this is the chestnut came from my mom, who had a horse farm, was breeding horses, and the name was Kastanienhof, which is a German word for chestnut farm. So we had the chestnuts and the Native Americans and the American Bulldogs.
Okay. Well, it's seemingly a different approach. I when I was doing some research on pedigree database, uh, first of all, seemingly you have put every puppy you've almost ever produced in that damn database because there's a lot of pages. And then secondly,
I
some of the
think
names I don't even know where to begin to pronounce. So I'm not sure if that was related to Native American culture or just, being German, but, um, uh
no. It is Indian, and that's what happens. Like I get when we started to search for names, we wanted Native American names, but with some letters we struggled, and then we ended up getting Indian names from the searching machine.
okay.
And this is
Yeah,
some
yeah,
of
I
the
don't
names. Why?
do you even know how to pronounce them? Because half of them I got into the X's,
Uh,
and when I got into the X's, I had no idea.
oh,
Yeah,
the Axis. They are Mexican. They are from the Inca and the Maya.
yeah, I could clearly see the influence, but I wasn't gonna try to pronounce them in my head. It just seemed purposeless. So,
They have these letters like Quetzalcoatl and names
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
So let's get into there's a good bit I want to cover because and I kind of went back and forth in my head about where to start, and I typically start with what would be your history, but I think in this case I'm going to switch it up. First thing I want to understand is you're located in Germany, and what is let's talk about the culture of American Bulldogs within Germany first. What are the struggles, e either now or in the beginning, that you had getting into the breed? And are there any country-related stipulations that you have to live within?
When I first started, the main limitation was the amount of breeders. I think by that time, there were three or four in all over Germany. So the first I visited was like 2 hours from us, and they had multiple breeds. And at that time, there was no internet. So you would have to search for ads in dog magazines. And then I would call them, and they had like for every breed they had a different phone number, so you would not find out that they have multiple breeds. But once we are there, of course, we saw it, and then you would have to walk through a disinfection bath with your shoes. You couldn't touch the dogs; they were all kenneled. Um, it was like a not so nice impression that I got, and then I was close to saying, okay, not so good. First, I wanted Staffordshire Terriers anyway, so I thought, yeah, maybe not go with this rare breed, but stay with the Staffordshire Terriers. But then I visited another breeder in Bavaria on the way to a holiday that was 6 hours from us. And to understand my struggle, I didn't even have a driver's license by then because I wasn't even 18. So my now husband But then boyfriend had to drive me there, and so on a way to a vacation, we stopped by, and he just had a litter of 3 weeks old puppy. The puppies were like 8 females, 2 boys. I wanted a boy. I don't know. Somehow, maybe everyone seems to want a boy when they start. So I had a look at these puppies and his adult dogs, and I pretty much liked what I saw, and I liked his ideas about things and how his approach to the breed and the dogs overall. On the way back, 3 weeks later, we stopped there again. They were 6 weeks old now. So and I really liked them, but I wanted a boy, and he had only two, and they were already sold. Only girls left, and I wanted to wait for me to turn 18 and get a bit older, anyways. But long story short, I ended up with a female from that litter, and that was my first dog, Bam Bam.
Bam, bam. Okay, so let's back up one step. So your initial look for an American Bulldog was from a breeder that you found in a dog magazine. That dog
Mm-hmm.
magazine, that breeder was breeding multiple breeds, but had a different phone number for every breed they were okay. That's
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, that's kinda crazy. And then when you said you visited there, they made you clean your shoes, and so they were obviously they I mean, you made it sound like it was a negative experience, but it seemed like they might have been taking, a very good precaution with, their breed stock.
um, for a commercial kennel, yes, but that was my problem with it. It was a
Okay.
commercial kennel,
And how
and in Germany, that's kind of a no go.
so when you say commercial kennel, you're kind of I guess in the term of it, like an American saying, would you say that that's a puppy mill, that they were just literally in the
Yeah,
business of breeding dogs to sell dogs? They really didn't have the
yeah, yeah.
mindset of like, "Oh, this is a breeding program. We have a goal that we're trying to reach within our breeding program. This is
No,
just
no,
getting dogs out there to
no.
be sold." Okay, which is interesting. I mean, the part of the issue, and I think you'll agree with this, is that when you get into breeding American Bulldogs, the biggest hurdle is the end user, the customer, if you will, and making
Yeah,
sure that they're prepared to take on this breed because they have their limitations and they have their challenges. And I think to find a good owner, you have to really do your due diligence as a breeder. So it's interesting that they would choose to breed American Bulldogs kind of in a commercial setting. That seems strange.
yeah. They had all the popular breeds. They had flat-coated retrievers. They had Labrador retrievers. All breeds at that point that they saw some potential of selling
Mhm.
puppies, and yeah, they didn't even tell you a lot about the dogs or anything. It was just, yeah, here's the dogs, there you go, and don't waste our time. Come back when you want to buy a puppy.
So you said at that time you were 18 or just about 18. Are you still living with your
Hmm.
parents at that point? Okay.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
decided, so let's go, let's I guess let's kick this. Well, let me finish this first thought. Uh, Outside of how you got to your first dog, what other limitations within Germany are there with the breed? Is there any stipulations?
So
I've heard that there's stipulations A in how they're kept, B in how they're
yeah,
bred, um, and then are there any public concerns that you have to maintain within this breed?
yeah, different things. Like number one is the overall animal welfare laws that got really strict now. So even the transportation of a dog in a trailer is a problem. You can transport it, but you cannot keep it in there. So on the big dog shows, the one German Shepherd event, for example, had to establish a parking lot control where owners had to come by every 2 hours and walk every single dog for half an hour. And they even had a machine where you would click in and off so that you can prove that you did that. You cannot lock the crates. You have to have water bowls inside the crates so that people from outside can see them. So that is really a big change. That's for the last couple of years. But besides that, we cannot have dogs in crates in the house. Not at all. It's forbidden by the law. We can have kennels, but they have to be 2 by 4 meters without the dog house counted per dog. Insulated doghouse, of course. Separate laying, resting place, of course. No chains, no cables, no nothing. No electric collars, no pinch collars whatsoever.
So, within okay, there's a lot to digest there. So, first and foremost, no crates in the house. You okay.
No.
So, basically, if you don't utilize a kennel outside, you have to keep all your dogs free range in the house. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're not allowed to train or use at all countrywide either a pinch collar, prong collar, or e-collar. You're not allowed to
Yeah.
either one. You're not allowed to use.
No.
Do the
No.
dogs have to be muzzled when you take them out in public? Okay.
No, no, but in parts you have with this breed some in some areas pit bulls, Staffordshires, and bull terriers have to be muzzled. I think now they can get rid of that by passing a temperament test. And in two or is it three of the regions of Germany, the American Bulldog is in point two. So that means they also have to pass a temperament test to be allowed to run off leash and off muzzle.
Okay. So, I mean, Germany's not an overly large country, so I'm assuming I mean,
Mm-mm.
is it general practice for most people to run their dogs off leash? It is?
Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah,
oh,
very.
really?
Yeah, all these red dogs that run towards you, barking and attacking your dog. Yeah,
That's
very
okay.
common.
And where you live, are you in the country? Are you in the city? Are you a suburb?
I'm in the country and in the very lucky position to really have no direct neighbors. We can go out in the fields and we live in a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone, which can be an advantage but also a
Mhm.
disadvantage.
Yep.
Um, After the first couple of years, I would say we established a good position here, and people realized us of being quite professional with the dogs and know what we do, and also that our dogs um, are not super dangerous and how to deal with everything. At the beginning, it was a bit of a crazy
Yeah, I
situation
could
because one thought of the fighting dogs and these bad people having them.
yeah, I mean, I live in a similar position where I live out in the country and I don't have a lot of what I'll call close neighbors, but, for whatever reason, and it's probably because I have a kennel set up, that a lot of dogs, when they do get loose, and leave their owner's property, end up on my property. I don't know if it's just the general attraction, the smell of the other dogs, the availability of them being outdoors, but, uh I even though my dogs aren't overly dog aggressive anymore, I still would probably be concerned about a strange animal coming onto the property and,
Oh yeah,
just
yeah,
territory aggression, stuff like that,
yeah.
so that's interesting. And then, what other challenges so when you go back and you say at the shows that there's a machine that logs your time. Is that based on like a chip in the dog or how are they
No, you just pull a little piece of paper and it says the time you did
oh,
that.
okay. Okay.
And it's not for all dog shows. That was just for the Bundesliga Hauptzuchtschau of the German
Okay.
Shepherds. So that's a very big event, and it's usually in a big city. So there's more eyes on that,
Mhm.
of course, than on a small Bulldog show. But even there, you have to see where you do it and what the community you are holding it in wants of you.
Okay. Well, that's kind of interesting. And then you said something about traveling with the dogs in a trailer, which is pretty common for most large breeders here. You're saying you can no longer do that, or there's a special stipulation about that?
Oh, you can. You can. It's just highly regulated. And for big dogs, you have now to have bigger crates. So everyone has to buy a new trailer with a bigger boxes
Mm. So
if you get control. If you're just driving here in the countryside, probably no one cares. But if you drive to a larger event with more control, they will measure the boxes. And for especially my big boy, I would definitely need a bigger crate in the trailer.
okay, all right. Well, so in all of this, how who regulates all these things? So, like a typical pet owner that can't have a crate in the house, how would that get found out? Is it just like,
Well, it wouldn't unless someone
mm,
reports you.
okay.
And that's where you have to be like careful, because what can I tell my puppy buyers? I tell them, hey, I recommend a crate, and then for some reason they decide they don't want to buy a dog of me because I'm that cool person with the dogs in the crates, and they report me, and tada, there's the problem. Then the official veterinary guys, they can come to my house and have a look at it. Of course, I have to let them in. They cannot just break the door and run in. But if they suspect you to treat animals not right, you have to prove that you're not doing that.
It's an interesting stance because I think most American Bulldog breeders would 1,000% tell you that a crate should be everything, in the early onset of training with your dog. It's a weird juxtaposition to hear that um, a country would essentially outlaw crates when there's so much value and structure built around using crates. Now, I can also attest that there have been instances where people have abused that, but I don't think the average person that cares about their dog would leave their dog in a crate um, for so long that it would be detrimental to the animal's well-being. I think I mean, most people in this country that breed American Bulldogs, if they don't utilize kennels, would use a crate and rotate situation. I don't think most people, um, myself included, run a large pack of dogs at once, especially in this breed. I've just never had great success with that. Um, have you been able to manage multiple dogs out now at once, or what have you been doing?
Well, I have them all out now, and I'm in the lucky situation that I can have all my dogs together, including the German Shepherd, although she's a pain in the ass. But when I first started, I had dogs that were really like dog aggressive, and if not that, they were at least not able of social interaction as a dog should be. That being said, I still didn't have this real crate thing established by that time, just because it wasn't common. You know, my parents raised their dogs and got them house trained by tying them out in their dog bed overnight, well, which were similar to a crate, but with a lead and a collar. And the dog can't leave the dog bed, and when it squeaks, you take it out, and so on and so on. So I wasn't used to that. But at that time, I got told about a crate from my breeder where I bought my first puppy. And I thought, that sounds like a reasonable idea. So I try it. And I had this number 5 very crate. But honestly, never really used it because she slept in our bed and was actually quite a good dog. So no need of that. She came along with my parents' dogs to a point, but she was not the most social animal. So I really had to watch her. But I had my own room. So when I was gone, I would lock her in my room, all good. Then I got my second dog. He was a bit more active. That was a Sousa male. The Sousa's Chestnut'S Cherokee of Sousa's American Bulldogs. And therefore, I needed that crate during daytime when I was at work, or that dog would have eaten my room. So I really appreciated the crate. But as soon as that dog was grown up in like 12 months, he wouldn't need it anymore. He never learned to destroy things. He wouldn't destroy things. He was good. So no point of that. But I listened to one of your former interviews where you said, yeah, and then that happens that you have one dog, you have two, and all of a sudden you turn around and you have 10. And yep, that is somehow what happens. I don't know how, but however, I had then 10 and they wouldn't come along. But still, by that point, we moved to our first own house and we would solve the situation by having the dogs in different rooms. So I would have the main pack of dogs that came along, which was Aussie and Maori and one younger female. And then I would have old Bam Bam in our bedroom and then another one in my office. So instead of crate and rotate the dogs, I would rotate my presence in the rooms. During the daytime, in the kitchen, the living room with that one pack, when I had to work in the office with the office dog, and then at night, Bam Bam in the bedroom. And that worked pretty well. I actually never had a situation where I had lots of dogs crated. It's usually just for the time when they are puppies to their year old, when I'm not here to supervise them, or at nighttime.
That's the part that I don't understand is like it only seems to lend in the favor of the dog when they're a puppy that they would be in a crate so they don't get into something they shouldn't be. It's like almost saying to you, uh like, okay, you have a young child, the child can't be in a crib, and then you're just gonna let the child run amok while you've gotta do chores. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't and to each their own, and I guess there's, a hierarchy within your country that has deemed this way. Let's go back and talk about in the beginning, you said your first and or second dog weren't too fond of your parents' dogs, and that over time that you have now developed a way that you can keep all the dogs out together. Do you think do you think that you've matured as a breeder and a trainer that has allowed you to keep multiple dogs out at a time as opposed to your inexperience when you first got into the breed and had those dogs come on board? Do you feel like, because I've gone through this kind of evolution as well, but I'm just curious to know, do you think it's really genetic that you've made great choices
Yeah.
over the years and have gotten to that way? Or do you think that your training has gotten better and that you put up with less?
No, no, I think it's really the genetics because with my first ever dog, she, as I said, she wasn't the most social dog and she was not able to communicate. So she wouldn't even tell other dogs off. She would just let them. But then there comes the point where, boom, she decides the other one has to die now. That was that one step too much. You die now. There was nothing in between that. And some of her offspring was the same. And it was also with other issues like she maybe eventually attack puppies right after birth. I think that was a lack of oxytocin though, but that was a problem with her. She was not really a very safe dog around humans. Every 10th person about that came to our house she decided she doesn't like, and she would show that very clear and noticeable. So at that point, somehow I got told that's normal. That's what American Bulldogs are like. I was close to leaving the breed, but instead of leaving the breed, I just moved my program. And at the beginning, she was still part of it, and I decided to choose puppies off of her that wouldn't have these issues. But somehow over time, even those excluded themselves, so she's completely gone out of my program now.
That's interesting. So let's talk about one thing because I think you and I interacted on a post recently on Facebook about the American Bulldog temperament. And maybe I think the biggest thing when you start looking at a breed standard about the American Bulldog is um, I think I'm trying to see how to phrase this, but the word aloof, I think in the English language gets misconstrued in different ways. Um, I think a lot of people think when they read the breed standard, when they talk about aloof with the temperament of an American Bulldog, is that the dog should be weary of strangers, when in actuality, aloof really means that the dog should be indifferent to strangers, meaning they really don't care. They're not necessarily super people friendly, but they're not also going to act out. What's your thoughts on just the general temperament of where the breed should truly be? Because at the nature of the dog, and I think we can all attest that the dogs are naturally kind of territorial. They do love to, what I'll say, guard or alert, a watchdog mentality to a threat. But after that initial reaction, what's your take on how these dogs should respond in any given situation to a person they're unfamiliar with, whether it be on property or off?
Well, of course, I like the idea of the indifferent dog. That's so cool and just doesn't care. But to be honest, that grade is so small from a dog that is really aggressive towards strangers or indifferent. So I came to the point, especially with our country being small and all these temperament tests people have to pass with their puppies to be allowed to have their dogs, that I rather have a dog that's super friendly and positive about strangers than one that's indifferent. Because right after indifferent comes suspicious, then comes aggressive, and I just can't have that. I just can't afford to have dogs that are suspicious, aggressive, and careful with strangers. Which doesn't mean, by no means, that my dog would allow anyone to enter the house when I'm not here. I know it's not the case. There have been incidences that told me they wouldn't.
What do you
Especially that big boy here, although he loves strangers, really, when he's on his own, he doesn't.
what do you mean when you say that people have to have their puppies pass a temperament test? Is that the average pet owner, or is that somebody looking to get into breeding?
No, no, that's the average pet owner in Bavaria. They have to. And it's a mean test. The test person that's doing the test comes into your house and threatens your dog while you are there, and the dog has to allow that.
That's
It's a heavy test.
it
Honestly.
seems it almost seems kind of
Yeah?
counterproductive, to be honest with you, because one would think that most people get into this breed for personal protection. Whether you're into training, I think everybody wants to use the dog as at least a visual deterrent. It could be the happiest go lucky puppy that licks you to death, but I think visually most people want to use these dogs as a deterrent for people to break into their homes. This seems like a counterproductive test. So, at what age is this test performed?
12
Okay,
months.
so a one-year-old pup. So you're right in the heart of teenagerhood, and you're right in the most honestly, probably one right in the most volatile point of this breed, where they're kind of a teenager. Nothing is new to them anymore, and they're making their own rules and getting into new stuff, and all of a sudden they're chewing all the zippers off your pants and whatever their case may be. It just seems like an odd place to really test these dogs. Now, are a lot of people getting dogs in Germany putting time into training, professional training?
Yeah, especially when they know they live in a country where they need this
Mm.
temperament test. And I have one dog in North Rhine-Westphalia, it's called. They have to have a temperament test too, but they also have to, right after they registered the puppy, they have to prove they go to a puppy training, to a dog training school. They have to prove that with their city government.
And
So if they do that, they can keep the dog without muzzle. If they don't, they have to muzzle it.
and what happens if the dog doesn't pass the temperament test?
It stays on a leash with a muzzle. You can keep it then, but it has to be on a leash with a muzzle all the time when in
So
public.
the temperament test is really if you wanna be off leash. Okay,
Yeah, and
and
without
without
muzzle.
muzzle. Okay. Let's let's back this thing way back up. So I think we've covered some stuff. One other thing about I wanted to ask you about specific to Germany is are there any restrictions based around breeding? What are those restrictions?
As long as you're a hobby breeder and you have less than three breeding females, um, you don't have to do anything actually. If you have three and more, you are rated like a commercial
Mhm.
breeder, whether the that's has nothing to do with the finances. So the financial department isn't bothered about that. They want to know whether you have an income of it or not. They don't care how many females you have. The female law is for the vet compartment. So even if you just have the three and just breed one, that doesn't matter. Even if one is dysplastic, it doesn't matter. As long as it is not spayed, it's rated a breeding female. And if you have three, you have to pass a test that you are capable of doing this and that you know what you are doing, and you have the facilities to do
Okay.
that.
I'd just be curious to understand what are the quote unquote capabilities to breed, because here, obviously it's the Wild West here, which is I don't know that breeding should be regulated, but in the same respect, when you have an open door policy for anyone to do it, it's the consumer's job to kind of navigate those waters and understand what you're getting into and with why you're getting into that breeder. There's plenty of people that just buy dogs from anybody that just don't understand. They just like, oh, this is the breed I want, and this is the breed I'm going to get, and they just pick somebody local and they get a dog. Um,
Yeah, it's the same here still, of course.
um, so let's back it up. Let's go back to the beginning. We talked about it a little bit. Um, you were 18. You grew up with dogs, and what
Yeah.
breed was that again?
Well, my parents used to have Airedale
Okay.
terriers. My grandma was even breeding dogs. She was breeding Caribou
Mhm.
terriers. My mom was more into horses, but they still had the terrier. And then there was me, and I just, I just did like these terriers at all. I hated the hair in the face and thought that was pretty nasty, and always wanted a German Shepherd dog.
Yeah, I don't know why you'd wanna do that to yourself. I mean, a bearded
Well, at that
American
time,
bulldog.
I was 5 years
Yeah,
old,
well, yeah, okay, alright,
so
fair enough. I'm gonna say a bearded American bulldog might not be the worst thing, but whatever. Um, uh, so, that first dog, you said that you were really you kinda had you had seen an American bulldog before you started seeing them in the magazine? Had you seen one in person? Okay.
no, no, I saw them in the Homeward Bound
Ah,
video, in the
old
movie,
Chance.
when I was like, how old was I? 12, and I fell in love with the dog, but didn't know about the breed. I thought it was a
Mm,
mixed breed. And then there was that article in the dog magazine when I was about like 16, 17, that discovered what kind of dog it was. And there was also a report about the first breeder in Germany, which was actually the one I went to later on. That was a bit with the different breeds in that.
okay. Um, and so you at that point you had looked through a magazine and which would here we have the newspaper and in your area they would have in the back of the newspaper they would have what we call a classified section. That classified section is
Hmm.
where people would sell their cars, their boats, but there was always a pets and animal section.
No, 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 no. It was in a real dog
Mm.
magazine that was just for dogs. Like it was a colored magazine with nice pictures, and they always would have a portrait about a breed every month.
And
It was a monthly magazine.
okay. And what year was this?
That was the magazine was from 1994, but I got it from a friend by 1996, I would say,
So
five or
you got your
six.
first dog right around 97, is that fair to say, or was it 96? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we're
yeah,
kind of on the same
97.
timeline. Now you kinda hit the ground running a little bit more than I did. Mine was stipend by, just my professional world. I was traveling a lot for a living, so I couldn't have a lot of dogs at the time because I wasn't home quite a bit. Um, so you pick up this first dog, and that was Bam Bam, correct? And it was a
Yeah.
female, and, I looked into her pedigree, didn't really see a whole lot that stood out to me as far as, dogs that I would know, except for Rip and Woody. Um, and Rip and Woody seems to be a lot of the foundation of quite a few working kennels. Um, and then as I got deeper into your pedigrees, I definitely saw that theme kind of staying true even when you went to other breeders in the future. Um, how far, how so when you got Bam Bam, had you decided at that point you were gonna get into dog sport, or did that come later?
No, I was already into dog sports. I was handling my grandma's Great Dane that she had by the time, and I did try her to BH with one. Oh my goodness, that dog has zero drive, no food drive, no prey drive, no nothing. I don't know how we managed to do that BH, but we did. And then I was doing something that's called Turnierhundsport. It's like it has an OB portion, and then it's jumping over hurdles, and but you have to run as well. And the time is counted that you need to go from start to finish as well.
Okay, so that's kinda more like, I guess, would it be would you think it would be considered like the AKC agility stuff? Similar to that?
No, it's not ability. It's more. It forces you to run
Did
more, and it has a full BH routine in the beginning of every
did
trial.
you have to jump over the hurdles yourself?
No, no, you just run next to them, but that's enough. You still have to run as fast as you can. It's like 100 meters or whatever.
Because I feel like if you had to jump over the hurdles yourself, we need to see that video. That's
No,
interesting.
no, no, no,
Okay,
no.
so is it fair to say then you got into the American Bulldog with the intention of continuing dog sport? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And did the kennel that you ended up what was the kennel name that Bam Bam came from? Boomers.
Boomers.
Um, and were they proficient in dog sport within their breeding program?
No, not at all. He was just selling
Okay.
pets. And he hated people doing dog sports. The Turnierhund sport was okay for him, but he was completely against the bite work side.
What was the reasoning behind that?
He thought it would be bad. He was an old-fashioned guy, and he thought that animals were mistreated there, that they were abused there, there was cruelty to animals, and it shouldn't be done.
Okay. Um, okay. I've heard maybe that some people have had reservations about working these dogs with biting just based on the intention that maybe they would make decisions on their own. Um, the more that I get into working programs and have witnessed working dogs, uh, I kind of feel the opposite that most of the dogs that work in bite work or sport that involves biting, um, those dogs typically, because of the structure in which they're raised, they actually, I feel, have less maybe what's the word I'm looking for? I don't feel like they think for themselves and they're not going to
No,
act out in their own right. I think a dog that
no,
probably is removed from that environment, lacks structure, is the dog that's actually
yeah.
going to do something to you and bite you. Um, okay. So we go from Bam Bam in 97. When do we get our second dog?
That was then Aussie in 2001.
And where did Ozzy come from?
He came from Sousa's American Bulldogs in
Yeah.
California.
So the Souzas were kind of that they really ran with that kinda hybrid, um,
Hmm.
multi-purpose working type mentality. Sousa's had Matthias, which was, a dog that seems to lend a lot of influence in your stuff, but also seems to carry through a lot of other working programs, and when you obtain that dog, did you just do it? This is 2001, so we're kind of like the internet's kind of around, but not really like, full tilt. Um, did you how did you communicate with them? How did you make this arrangement?
It came because the breeder of my Bam Bam by that time organized a dog show and had Greg Sousa judge it.
Mhm.
And then I was still having my breeder from that time as my mentor. And I said, hey, you know what? I have the capacity of a male, and I would tend to import one for us to use together because we were working closely together and I would still listen to him. So I said, hey, what would you advise me to do? Where should I get a dog? And then he said, well, yeah, he had Greg Sousa over to judge and he talked to him. He saw lots of pictures of his dogs, and from the ideas that he communicated, he thinks that might be a good opportunity. So, and then I came in contact with Greg still over the telephone, actually, and not through internet. And I would talk to him on the phone, and that's how I ended up having a reservation on his second Matthias and Laverne breeding.
Okay. And then that dog that you brought over was who?
That was Chestnut's Little Cherokee of SAV.
Yeah, and he seems to run pretty solid through most of your stuff at this point. Um, mm,
Yeah, he was a cool dog, and he really imprinted his offspring.
and when you say that, do you mean physically or mentally or both? Yeah.
Both,
Did you
both.
did you end up working him and titling him?
Yes, a lot. He was my first dog actually to really title. So I had with in between I had started to do search and rescue work, and I was a member of a search and rescue team with my young dog that I kept from my bee litter out of Bam Bam, but I then gave away due to temperament issues. So I when I got Aussie, I continued that, and I really handled him there. He passed the first and the second exam, so he was ready for real life searches for lost people, and we did that. Coincidentally, I had Mike Stone over for a show to judge, and he was also a working guy. And he said, "Yeah, have you ever tried that dog? If he bites?" I said, "No, I'm doing the search and rescue stuff. See, and yeah, but I want to know if he bites." And we had an appointment at the German Shepherd Club at the time that I knew as well, just because Mike was off searching for some shepherds and stuff. And he said, yeah, come on, take your dog. I asked the helper if he lets him bite. And if he bites, you promise me you do a BST with him. And actually, that's the story. Then, in the end, I flew to Vegas to do a BST on the dog.
Okay, so obviously he bit he bit during yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
2 months from zero to BST to fly to Vegas and do the BST
Okay.
there.
All right. Um, okay. So that's Chestnut's little Cherokee, which he visually, when I first saw him in the pedigrees, he kind of reminds me of Boyd's High Jumping Mikey a little bit from his kind of his phenotype. Um, it- so from there, you move on with him, and you said that you had already had a couple litters out of Bam Bam.
Yeah, I had the A litter with a male from Germany, which showed exactly some of these temperament issues. I also got some entropia in the
Okay.
litter. And I had the B litter. For that, I flew over to Joshua
Mhm.
Kennels to breed to Joshua's Old
Mhm.
Southern White. That was a recommendation from Anke Münke at the time, who was White Bulls
Yep.
American Bulldogs.
Okay.
And then the C litter was already Greg's dog Koa.
Koa. Okay, I'm not familiar with him as much.
Koa. And I also flew at that time, no artificial insemination. So I took my dog into a plane, flew over with her to do the breeding. And when I did the breeding to Koa, well, did the same with Josh though. But when I did the breeding with Koa, I also met Matthias and Greg's dogs. And that was around the time when we then also bought Ozzy.
And what year is this that you're doing this flying back and forth?
Joshua was
Mhm.
2000. And that was actually the year while I was in the US breeding my female. That was when the incident in Germany happened with a pit bull killing a young boy that led to all the dangerous dog rules we had in the following.
I gotcha. So this so
So that was it.
all of these what we'll call kind of is it related to breed restrictions, or is this kind of just how all breeds are treated in Germany?
No, it's breed restrictions. And at the beginning, it was super tough. They banned the pit bull right away, and also the Staffordshire and the Bull Terrier. They forbid imports of these breeds. For a while, there were completely breeding bans, but that got all loosened up in the
Okay.
following.
Hey, I'm gonna take a piss real quick. Give me 1 second. Yep.
Yeah,
Sit
that's
tight.
fine. I am back with a coffee.
Coffee?
Oh, yeah, you keep me awake. Well, I won't fall asleep, but however, see here, this picture. I just found it. It's. I need to take it maybe for you. This was taken when we went to Arizona to then go to Vegas to do that
Yeah.
BSC. And this is like four generations. It's Koa, Matthias, Ozzy,
Oh,
and Luke.
nice.
And so there are four boys from one after
Yeah.
the other.
It's amazing they can be in the same picture together. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, this is why I started to love Greg's dog after my Bam Bam being so antisocial and terrible.
Okay. So, I let's talk about some of those first breedings. So you do the Joshua Kennel, Old Southern White, who, Joshua Kennels really has had a solid program together. Um, what would you say that you gained and or lost from that breeding, that first breeding in particular?
I didn't like that type in the end. Too too much standard type looking, and by the time I started, I think I wrote that to you before. My Bam Bam female was rated to be a tiny, houndy, typeless thing. No one will really take her serious. If I see her today, she will almost be a hybrid. This is how times changed, and by that time I used the Joshua dog for the health. Simply and plain because of that, the dog had excellent hips, and we didn't do any other health tests by the time. So excellent hips were a good criteria. I liked the dogs for the looks. Yes, it was a standard type dog. I preferred that at the time. I was very scared of the chubby, bully things that couldn't move. Um, so he complimented my female, but the offspring I got was far less dog, longer noses, longer legs, more of a pit bull look all over them.
Yeah. Um, so that's interesting. So let's when you got into the American Bulldog, when we talk about the 2 types, obviously, you clearly had some reservations about getting in to the bullier side of things because you felt they were chubby and a little bit
Yeah,
heavier.
that John. I have that Blackwell book,
Yes,
the book from John
Blackwell's
Blackwell. Yeah, and I saw some of these dogs and thought, ooh, no, I'm not dealing with that.
Blackwell's Black-Eyed Susan to me is still a perfect American Bulldog. But,
Yeah,
yeah.
I liked her, and there was one puppy. Maybe I should go and get the book for you, show you my favorite picture. I saw that picture and thought, yep, that's the dog I
So when
must
you
have.
got into it, did you understand that there were 2 types?
No, because at that time they
There
actually
weren't
weren't.
back.
They were all in one ring,
Yeah,
and there were just some that looked bullier and some that looked more performance type
okay.
dogs.
And then so the second time you came over for Joshua's and you came over for
Hmm.
the Sousa stuff. Um, and Sousa kind of, even I would say to this day, kind of stands on either side of the line. I don't know that they're really houndy looking standard. I mean, by any means, they're probably right in the middle of a hybrid program. And
Yeah,
did you
yeah.
have, when you got into breeding, did you have uh, a picture in your head of what you wanted
Uh,
your type to be? Did you let me ask you this. Let me ask you it a different way. Did you, when you first got into breeding, when you decided, okay, I'm going to breed, um, what were your goals? What was the
I wa-
end goal for it?
my end goal was to breed a dog as written in the standard, and by that time we just made. Well, I just there was the ABA standard, I think, but there was also the standard in the Blackwell book. And that was one of my references. And then there was a picture of a dog. Its name was Svetla's Junior. I think I have to dig for that magazine for you and get you a picture of him. He was my picture of what I think the dog, the standard described.
What was the kennel name again?
It was Svetla's
Was that an
Junior. Zwettler.
oh, so
And
here
dot
it'd be
S.
Wettlers. When you said Vettlers, I was like, "Oh, what?"
No, it's a Z. Z at the
Oh,
beginning.
really? Okay. I'll have to
Yeah.
look for that dog. So that's interesting. So you
I searched for him for you. He was in that magazine that I told you
okay.
about, where I learned about the
Yep,
breed.
okay.
And Rattler. Rattler from the movie,
Rattler,
of course,
yeah.
but he was just a youngster. But I liked him too.
So you initially you started out with what you had like kind of a picture of what you decided you were gonna breed
Yeah.
to. And then,
Yeah.
um, so when you first get started, you were already doing some working stuff. It didn't sound
Hmm.
like you had immediately moved into Schutzen or bite work.
No,
You were just kind
no,
of
not at
interested in
all.
doing anything with your dog. Did
Yeah.
at some point your program change its focus to working first, look second, or was both things
Mm,
kind of working at the same time?
always at the same time, both at the same time, and overall, the general temperament. Because due to some bad experiences at all, as well within the breed, but also with these other breeds, I figured out that temperament is the main thing. You know, you may sell a dog with bad hips, and that's terrible, and I feel sorry for the people. And well, although that so far never led to an early end of any of my dogs, because if they were dysplastic, and there weren't many that were, they still led a full active life, and you would never notice it till the end. But even if that would lead to the end, everyone would be sad and everyone would be sorry. But everyone, yeah, would feel sorry for the dog. If you have a dog with a bad temperament that kills someone, no one will ever be happy again. And I would never be able to forgive myself if I did that knowingly.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, I think for as much as I think for myself in my program, temperament is become the priority. Um, I have one line of dogs that is very identifiable. Um, that the temperament is just exactly where they should be for an American Bulldog. Very intelligent, very people friendly, can get a little chippy with another dog with a novice handler, but for the most part, that line of dogs has been just really great all around. The downside to that line of dogs has been their structure a little bit. Usually a little easty westy in the front, maybe a little bit of bowed elbows, but as far as your everyday, really highly intelligent, pet, you could get no better really with those dogs. Um, and so I agree with you. There's something there to talk about the hips, and I don't wanna get into this right now, but it's interesting that you would say that if you had produced a dog with bad hips, which we all have done, um, that those dogs typically go on to live a full life without any hip issues, which is a weird place to be because we all hyper focus on these hip scores at times. And we wash dogs out of our programs with bad hips, uh, that we end up pet homing, and those dogs go on to never show any issues with their hips, which is so weird.
Yeah, but you know what? No, I don't think it's weird. I think it's absolutely the reason why they don't end up, because we wash them out, we don't breed them, we keep the standard high. So our bad dogs are still
Yeah.
reasonable. If we would start to include the bad dogs, we would go down the line, and then the bad ones that appear would be so bad they couldn't walk. And there have been dogs within the breed that couldn't walk. Not from my program, not from yours, not from any of the responsible breeders, but there have been some from irresponsible breeders that hardly had a socket.
Yeah, that's important to note. I think you're right there. If you try to include those dogs in your breeding program, you end up down a very slippery slope of putting stuff into
Yeah.
your dogs that eventually will lead to exactly what I've seen, and you've probably seen on many hip boards where dogs literally have zero
Mhm.
sockets. It's almost like the hip has no connectivity whatsoever, which is it's very rare to see, but it is pretty frightening when you do see it. All right.